It sounded like a small can rolling on the floor or something. Both of us looked at each other, feeling a bit scared. But I guess that was the main reason we decided to explore the place. We stood there quietly, straining our ears, but nothing else broke the silence. I led the way, carefully walking back through the kitchen to the doors that opened into the main dining room. I tried to open the door as quietly as possible, but it creaked loudly, much more than I wanted. Mark followed me as I stepped in and peeked around the corner. Right away, I saw a can lying on the floor across the room. The dining room was shaped like an L, so I could only see part of it. Most of the tables were knocked over and the chairs were smashed. I was really surprised to see the place in such a mess, as it always looked like a regular empty building from the outside. Anyway, I began walking deeper into the room, heading toward the other section to get a better look. Very faintly, I could hear what seemed like breathing. It was so soft I wasn't sure I was really hearing it. I took a few more cautious steps and then peeked around the corner. My heart stopped when I saw an old man sitting on a chair in front of a table at the back of the dining room. He was staring at the floor, breathing quietly, not moving at all. Mark grabbed my arm, and we both dashed out of there, running back to our car. I was so shaken, I insisted Mark drive us back to his place. We spent the rest of Halloween night in his room, just talking over what we had seen and wondering what that man was doing there alone. Years have passed, but every time I remember seeing that man sitting there, it still terrifies me, and I can't figure out what he was doing in that abandoned place by himself. I've always loved Halloween since I was little. The idea of a whole season filled with spooky things and scary movies really excites me. Last Halloween, when I was 22, I lived in a cozy, small house with my friend Sam. It was Halloween night, around 9 p.m. The kids had stopped trick-or-treating, so I put away the candy and turned off all the lights. Sam and I sat down to watch some horror films. After we finished one movie, I asked Sam to pick another one while I went to get some snacks from the kitchen. On my way to the kitchen, something moved by the glass door to the backyard, catching my eye. It scared me a bit, so I walked over to check. Seeing nothing else, I made sure the door was locked before grabbing some popcorn to take back to the living room. Just as Sam started the new movie, we heard a loud noise from the backyard. We exchanged nervous glances and walked to the kitchen door together. I turned on the outside light, opened the door slightly, and looked around. Our backyard was fenced and small, so it would be easy to spot anyone, but I saw no one. Thinking it was probably just a neighbor making noise, I closed the door and we went back to our movie. Halfway through the movie, Sam got up to get some water. Suddenly, he whispered from the kitchen, sounding really scared. "Dude, there's someone here." His fear made me anxious too. I went to him and asked what was wrong. He said that just as he reached the kitchen, he saw a man sprint past the backyard door. Trying to calm both of us, I suggested it might just be a Halloween prank. Part of me hoped saying it out loud would make it feel more true, but the uneasy feeling lingered. A few minutes later, someone rang the front doorbell. I went first with Sam right behind me to the front door and peeked through the peephole. There was a man wearing a white mask and dark clothes on our porch. He was holding a pillowcase that looked full, like it was stuffed with candy. He just stood there, not moving or looking around, just staring at the door. Unsure what to do next, I let Sam have a look. We decided to ignore him and wait to see if he would go away. We sat back on the couch, silent and tense, listening for any sound. Then, feeling uneasy, I stood up to check again. The man was no longer there, but he had left his heavy pillowcase on the porch. "Let's call the police. This doesn't feel right," Sam said. I nodded, and we went to get my phone from the living room, but as I passed the hallway, I froze. The man in the mask was right there, pressing against the glass door in the backyard. I shouted for Sam, and we both sprinted to my bedroom and quickly locked the door. Sam took out his phone and dialed 911, while I pushed a dresser in front of the door as a barricade. We were both terrified and didn't want to take any chances. Soon, we heard loud banging on my bedroom window. and the sound of someone trying to open it from outside. Since we had only been living there for a few months, I wasn't even sure if the windows were locked. We had never needed to check them before. Sam yanked the curtain aside, and the man outside took off running. Fortunately, the windows were indeed locked. We stayed hidden in my room for what felt like forever, until the police finally arrived. By then, the man had disappeared, but the pillowcase was still lying on the porch. A police officer cautiously opened it, looked inside, and then emptied it on the ground. It was full of leaves and small branches. The officer suggested it might have been a trick, a way to scare us into opening the door so the man could force his way inside. However, with no solid leads or evidence, the police left after a brief search of the area. We were deeply shaken up by the whole ordeal, but fortunately, nothing more happened that night, or in the days that followed. Still, the fear lingered, and we eventually decided to move out a few months later, no longer feeling safe in that house. Every year, our little town holds a Halloween festival during the final week of October. It's packed with spooky stuff like haunted houses and creepy corn mazes. My buddies and I have a tradition to hit the festival before we go trick-or-treating to really get into the spirit of Halloween. As usual, we met there around 5 p.m. The place was swarming with people, which is typical for Halloween, but pretty much every ride or attraction had super long lines that didn't seem worth the wait. After wandering around for a bit, we noticed that the only attraction without a huge line was the corn maze. Corn mazes always gave me a weird vibe. I guess it's because you can quickly feel lost and start to lose track of which way is which. We stood in line for a short while, then walked into the maze. Inside, they had set up lots of spooky scarecrows and other creepy decorations which made it more exciting than just a regular maze. But after about 10 minutes, it started to feel boring, like we were just walking in circles. At one point, we bumped into an older man dressed as a scarecrow who simply walked past us. He appeared again a few minutes later. Initially, I thought he was part of the maze's scare tactics, but it struck me as odd that he didn't try to scare us. Plus, it seemed strange for an adult to be wandering alone in a corn maze. After wandering for another 10 minutes, we finally made our way out. We checked the lines one last time, but decided to leave since we didn't want to waste the whole night waiting and miss out on trick-or-treating. The festival was set up right in the middle of our neighborhood, making it easy to just walk a few blocks to start our candy collecting. We'd visited about 20 houses and were moving along when one of my friends suddenly stopped us. "Hey, isn't that the scarecrow guy from the maze?" We all looked where he was pointing. Sure enough, there was the man in the scarecrow outfit standing across the street from us. He wasn't watching us, though. He was staring intensely at the house next to him. We all felt a chill run down our spines, realizing this guy definitely wasn't an employee of the festival. We decided to skip a few houses to put some distance between us and him, then carried on with our night. But just a few minutes later, there he was again, this time on our side of the street and heading straight towards us. He was just a few houses away from us now, and it was clear there was something off about him. We hurried to the next corner and made a sharp left. Then we sprinted to the next street and turned right, hoping he hadn't seen where we went. By this point, we were seriously scared and had no clue what he wanted, but it was definitely frightening. Luckily, one of my friend's houses was nearby, so we planned to stay there for a while, maybe half an hour, to make sure he was gone before we ventured out again. We had only been inside for about 10 minutes when we heard a faint rustling sound outside one of the windows in the room. We exchanged nervous glances, none of us wanting to pull back the curtain to see what was outside. Eventually, I gathered some courage, crept over, and carefully peeked behind the curtain. The man was standing just a few steps from the house, staring right at the window, holding something in his hand. It looked like a hammer or maybe a crowbar, but I jumped back before I could really see clearly. My friends instantly understood the danger, and we quickly called 911 to report him following us. Meanwhile, my friend dialed his parents to inform them about the situation. It felt like an eternity, but it was only 5 minutes before the police arrived. During those minutes, we heard nothing more. However, The moment we heard the sirens close by, there were sounds of footsteps rushing away from the backyard. When the police arrived, we told them everything in detail. They mentioned that there had been several other complaints about a man in a scarecrow costume causing trouble at the fair. We decided to stay inside for the rest of the night, which was a bummer since it ruined our Halloween plans. Yet, even with the police around, we couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that he might still be out there, lurking somewhere close, watching and waiting for another chance to approach us. I've always loved music. Even in high school, all my friends were into playing instruments. My favorite was the guitar, and I enjoyed every moment I spent strumming its strings. My buddies and I would meet up to play music together, and even though we sounded terrible, it was our thing and I loved it. As I got older, I took on a typical office job at an accounting firm. I didn't play guitar as much, and I lost contact with most of my music friends from my youth. That's why I started looking at Craigslist's classifieds. There were lots of ads for bands needing musicians and people wanting to start new bands. While browsing these ads on my computer, one caught my attention. Looking for a lead guitarist for a rock cover band, it read. That sounded just right for me since I was only looking for something fun for the weekends. I responded to the ad, and in no time, I got an email back from a man named Mike with a list of songs they were playing. I knew how to play most of the songs already, and I felt good about my chances to join the band. Mike gave me his address and phone number. He said the band practiced in his basement, and we set up a time for me to come over and audition the next night. I was really excited to meet and play with new people after a dull day at work. As evening approached and the sun was setting, I drove into Mike's neighborhood. The neighborhood was quiet, just off a busy street, giving it a peaceful suburban vibe. I drove slowly, keeping an eye out for the right house number. When I reached the address, the house was completely dark. Not a single light shone, which made me uneasy. I thought maybe I had made a mistake, so I grabbed my phone and called Mike. "Hey, I think I'm here. Are you around?" "Yeah, I'm here. Come through the garage," Mike replied. I looked at the garage, noticing the door was partly open. It seemed odd to enter a stranger's house this way, but I decided to go ahead. "Okay, I'll be right there." I grabbed my guitar and walked towards the garage, but then I froze. There was someone standing on the other side of the partially open garage door. I could only see their feet. Feeling a wave of panic, I blurted out, "I think I'm going to head home. Thanks anyway." Suddenly, the garage door swung open fast. An older man with a stern look was staring at me. I didn't wait around. I turned and ran towards my car, hearing his footsteps close behind me. Thankfully, I made it to my car and locked the doors just in time. I sped away, my heart pounding. The next day, I reported what happened to the police. They told me the house had been empty for almost a year and the owner was abroad. I was left with so many questions. Who was that man? What did he want with me? Although I still think meeting new people on Craigslist can be good, it's crucial to trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, leave immediately. You never know what kind of people you might run into. My name is Mike, and this eerie event unfolded during the summer break between my sophomore and junior years at university. Like many other students, I took on a job during the break. I found myself working at a call center, attempting to sell products over the phone. I really didn't like this job at all. The bright office lights seemed to suck the life out of me every moment I spent trapped in my little workspace. That's why I left the job in less than a month. Although I was relieved to leave, my happiness didn't last long. College isn't cheap, and I needed to figure out how to pay my bills. One night, while scrolling through online job postings, I decided to try my luck on Craigslist. I sent off several applications and then moved on to browse the odd jobs section, hoping to find something that would get me outside, like cutting grass or some other garden work. A particular advertisement grabbed my attention. It was a call for assistance with a house renovation. The task was to demolish a wall on the upper floor of an old house. The pay was $15 an hour for about 8 hours of work. Considering $15 per hour was much more than the minimum wage back then, and I liked the idea of getting paid to break down a wall, I responded to the ad with hopes high. The next morning, I eagerly checked my email, and a rush of excitement hit me when I saw that I was hired. The homeowner, a man named Luke, and I agreed I would start the next day. Luke's house was located in a historic, quaint neighborhood. It seemed like most of the homes there had stood for over a century. Huge trees stretched along the slim road, their long shadows merging with the morning sunlight. Arriving at Luke's house, I followed the stone pathway and knocked on the slightly ajar door. A large, sturdy man greeted me with a friendly yet somehow unsettling smile. He appeared to be in his early 30s. "You must be Mike," he said. "That's right," I replied as I stepped into the house, not realizing the chilling adventure that awaited me inside. "Are you Luke?" I asked. "Yes, that's me. Let me show you what needs to be done," he responded. As I stepped into the hallway, Luke explained what he expected from me for the day. Luke was really friendly and seemed like a nice person. Even though I was in a stranger's house by myself, I didn't feel worried. "There are 2 bedrooms upstairs that I want to make into one big room. Your job is to knock down the wall between them. The builders are coming next week to finish everything," he told me. "That sounds fine," I nodded, agreeing to the plan. It seemed like a cost-effective way for him to prepare for the renovations, and I was glad for the work. Luke led me upstairs, and we entered one of the bedrooms where a sledgehammer and an axe were waiting. "There you go," Luke said, pointing at the wall with a smile. "I have to go to work, but you can call me if you need anything," he said. "All right, thanks," I replied. After Luke left, I picked up the sledgehammer to test its weight, swinging it slightly. I watched from the window as Luke drove away. Now I was completely alone in the house. With each hit of the sledgehammer, more debris accumulated at the wall's base. Soon I had made a hole in the plaster. That's when I saw something strange in the wall. It looked like an old dusty rug rolled up inside. Curiously, I poked it with the hammer. To my shock, it rolled over to reveal what seemed to be a dried-up face. Panic surged through me. Adrenaline kicked in, and I ran out of the house as fast as I could, sprinting down the street, my heart pounding. Could Luke be involved in something terrible? Why would he ask me to demolish a wall that concealed a body? Nothing was adding up. Once I felt safe, I called the police. They investigated and later updated me. Their experts determined the body had been there for at least 40 years, which meant Luke couldn't have been involved directly, given his age. As the case unfolded over the following months, more details came out in the news. It turned out the house used to belong to a notorious serial killer from the 1980s who had died in jail years ago. I never talked to Luke again after that day. I imagine he was just as disturbed by the discovery as I was. It's eerie to think about him living in that house all those years, unaware of its dark past. If there's anything good to come from this horror, it's that the victim's family could finally find some peace. I had been flipping burgers at McDonald's for quite a while. I started while still in school and just never left after I graduated. The job itself was pretty routine, but the people there made it bearable. I liked working with them. The only real issue was the money. It was tough making ends meet, and I really needed some extra cash. Then one day I saw an ad for a night shift job at another McDonald's across the city. My usual spot shut its doors at 11 p.m., and switching was the only way I could take the late shift. The pay for working nights was almost twice what I made during the day, which was too good to pass up. With a good word from my boss, I got the job right away. This shift ran from midnight to 8 in the morning. It turned out to be a key shift because the place was close to the highway. Many truck drivers would drop by for a quick coffee and bite before hitting the road again. Besides serving these customers, night was the time to stock up and prepare for the busy day ahead. I usually worked with another guy named Tom. He was about my age, 22 or 23. Tom had sharp features and deep-set eyes. He was a man of few words, but we got along fine for the most part. Tom smoked a lot, more than anyone else I knew. I smoked too, but not nearly as much as he did. One night, while I was taking out the trash, I noticed Tom on a break. But he wasn't smoking. He was talking to some older man wearing a worn-out gray hoodie. It looked like the man gave Tom some money, and Tom handed him a small plastic bag. It was pretty clear what was happening. I usually mind my own business, but the way Tom glared at me right then, I knew it wasn't something I could just ignore. Tom's stare was so fierce it felt like he was shooting arrows from his eyes. After I tossed the trash into the dumpster, I went back inside the restaurant. When Tom came back from his smoke break, he walked straight up to me and whispered fiercely that he'd kill me if I breathed a word to anyone. I usually prefer to stay out of trouble, but his threat really bothered me. Looking back, I realize I should have called the cops right then, but it's easy to say that now. After that, Tom and I stopped talking completely, though he would still give me a cold look whenever we passed each other. Weeks passed, and I thought maybe Tom had let it go. I was wrong. One morning, while driving home from work, I noticed a car trailing me. It was keeping its distance, but followed every turn I made. I was pretty sure it was Tom. His house was in the complete opposite direction of mine, so there was no chance this was just a coincidence. Instead of leading him to my home, I drove to the nearest police station. As soon as I pulled into the station, the car behind me made a quick U-turn and sped off. I didn't file a report then, since there was nothing concrete to report. A few days later, I was walking in the park near my place when I noticed someone lurking behind some bushes, watching me. It was Tom. He was stalking me. That was the last straw. I went directly to the police station and spilled everything. I explained about the suspicious exchange I saw, the car that followed me, and Tom hiding in the park. The police ran a background check on him and discovered he had a history of criminal activities and was currently on parole for some old thefts. This made the situation a lot more serious for him. I never saw Tom again after that day. I heard he got locked up for breaking his parole, partly due to drug charges. Though he was never formally accused of stalking, the thought of him holding a grudge against me is frightening. One day he'll be out again, and I can't help but worry that he might decide to settle his scores. Ever since I was little, I've really liked McDonald's. Some people stop liking it when they grow up, but for me, it's still a special part of being a kid that I've held on to. There's one McDonald's close to where I live that I go to a lot. It's got a big place to sit and eat, and there's always enough room, even when it's very busy. The people who work there are the nicest of any McDonald's I've been to. One day, when I was waiting to order, I saw there was a new manager working behind the counter. He had jet black hair, slicked back, and he wore glasses. He looked more like he should be in a movie about gangsters than running a McDonald's. I didn't think too much about it, though. People come and go all the time in restaurants. When it was my turn to order, Carol, who has worked there a long time and knows me by name, was at the counter. "Hey, Lester, what can I get for you today?" she asked. "I'll take my usual, a quarter-pounder meal with extra pickles," I answered. "Coming right up," Carol replied. I moved to the side to wait. Soon Carol was back with my food on a tray. "Thanks," I said, and went to sit down. When I took my first bite, I realized there were no pickles on my burger. I figured Carol must have just forgotten. I went back to the counter to tell her. "Oh, I'm sorry about that, Lester. Here are your pickles," she said, giving me a small paper cup full of pickles. "It's no problem, thank you," I replied, and went back to my table to enjoy my meal. As I sat eating, I couldn't help but notice the new manager talking quietly to some of the other staff. They all seemed a bit nervous around him. His presence was definitely making an impact, but perhaps not in the usual way you'd expect at a fast food place. It was like a chill had come over the restaurant, and it wasn't from the air conditioning. Just then, the manager stepped out from behind with a harsh frown on his face. "Carol, can we talk in the back?" he demanded in a low voice. Yes, sir," she answered, sounding unsure. I could hear him shouting at her from where I was sitting. It seemed too much just for a few missing pickles. Even though I didn't like seeing someone treated badly, I decided it was best not to get involved. After finishing my meal, I cleaned up my table and left. The next day, when I entered the McDonald's, something immediately felt wrong. The whole atmosphere had changed. Carol was at the counter, and she looked as if she hadn't slept at all. There were dark circles under her red, tired eyes. The bright, happy way she usually acted was missing. She moved slowly, like every task was a struggle. That new manager was there too, standing behind her, watching over everyone like a strict overseer. I bet he's really mean, I thought to myself. Not liking the scene, I decided to leave. Later that night, I was out with friends at a new bar downtown. We stayed until about 2 in the morning. I loved to dance and was showing off my moves, which my friends thought were amazing. Since it was my turn to drive, I hadn't drunk anything. After dropping everyone off, I drove past the McDonald's. It was nearly 3 in the morning, and it should have been closed, but the lights were still on. Worried, I stopped to check. I parked and walked over to a window with lights on. What I saw inside was terrifying. The manager was standing in the center, while Carol and the other staff were on their hands and knees cleaning the floor. He was making them work through the night. This can't be right, I thought. As he turned, I noticed he was holding something in his hand. It was a gun. Shocked, I quickly ran back to my car and drove directly to the police station. The officer at the desk didn't believe me at first, but when the police went to check, they found everything just as I had described. Some time has passed since that night, and I've heard that the manager got fired and was also charged with kidnapping because he wouldn't let the staff leave. I had a bad feeling about him from the beginning. It's usually best not to judge someone just by how they look, but sometimes you really should trust your gut feeling. It's scary to think what could have happened if I hadn't gone to look that night. I'm glad we never found out. Every summer, my family would go to our place deep in the forest near Crystal Creek, not too far from the quiet town of Maple Hollow, Missouri. We usually lived in the bustling city, but Dad always said it was good for us to get to know nature. He thought it would teach us how to be careful and show respect to the world around us. The drive from Houston always felt forever long. I was young, just like my little sister Lily, so Mom tried to make the drive fun to help Dad concentrate on driving. Our land was a big piece of wild forest, more than 10 acres. The only thing built there was a tiny cabin with one room. It didn't have any modern comforts like running water or electricity, only a wood stove for cooking. And of course, there was an outhouse, though I wouldn't really call it a structure. I was 11 back then, and Lily was around 8. That meant I could roam around by myself, but Lily had to stay where Mom and Dad could see her. I loved having my own adventures and finding hidden spots, streams, caves, and once I even stumbled upon a hidden waterfall. Sometimes my parents let me sleep outside by myself. It was normal for me to be out exploring all night. During one of these explorations, I found another cabin hidden among the trees. I knew I wasn't supposed to wander off our land, but sometimes curiosity got the better of me. Curious as ever, I walked up and knocked on the door. 2 old women answered, both smiling kindly. One was small with a bent back, wearing a long flowing dress. The other was taller, wearing a purple sweater, and she looked like she might have been a teacher or a librarian in another life. "Hello, dear. You seem to be far from home," said one of the ladies. "Sorry, I was just exploring and got a bit lost," I admitted. "Don't worry about it. Why don't you come in?" invited the other lady warmly. After walking in the woods for many hours, I was glad to have a break. We gathered around their kitchen table, and I started telling them about the places I had explored. My stories might have seemed dull, but the elderly women seemed to enjoy them. Then we had dinner and sat together on their old couch. They had a lovely white cat that jumped onto my lap and stayed there. Before we knew it, the sun was almost down. "You can stay here tonight if you'd like. I'm sure your parents won't worry," one of the women suggested. "All right, it's probably too dark to walk back now," I agreed. They prepared a bed for me, and I fell asleep as soon as I lay down. The next morning, they walked me to the edge of their property, and I went back home. I told my parents about everything: the cabin, the 2 nice ladies, and even the white cat. They weren't angry, but they wanted to meet these ladies themselves. That afternoon, all of us went back to the cabin. But when we got there, we only found ruins that looked like they had been empty for a long time. We were all confused, especially me. Just as my family started to doubt my story, A thin white cat dashed by us and disappeared into the forest, leaving us stunned. I still can't fully explain what happened that night. I sometimes think it was just a very clear dream, but it felt too real. Years later, I tried to find out more about that old cabin online. I found a news article titled, "Sisters Move to Remote Cabin to Live Off the Land." The photo showed the two old women just as I remembered them, and the article was dated July 1st, 1925. This story happened last summer. My name is Ben, and I have always been a fan of being outdoors. That's the reason I make it a point to explore at least one new hiking trail every year. My girlfriend Ellie pointed out a trail not too far from where we live. We started our journey filled with excitement for the day ahead. The path was rough, less traveled compared to others I've known. Small yellow squares were nailed to every 10th or 11th tree to mark the way. We were enjoying ourselves so much that we didn't realize the markers had disappeared. We were lost. There was no need to worry. We were seasoned hikers with enough food and water. Ellie and I attempted to retrace our steps, but couldn't find the original path. Everything around us looked identical. After wandering for about an hour, we found a clearing with a small cabin right in the middle. As we got closer, I saw fresh tire tracks by the cabin's entrance, yet there were no vehicles around. "This is good. There are people nearby," Ellie said with relief. "Yes, we just need to wait for them to return, and they'll help us out," I responded, trying to sound calm. "Let's see if anyone is inside," Ellie suggested. "Good idea," I agreed. I knocked on the sturdy wooden door with my fist. No response. Ellie peered through a window, then turned to look at me, her face pale as if she had seen something terrifying. She was speechless. Curious, I joined her at the window. The sight inside stunned me. Inside, there was a huge stack of cash and several firearms laid out. We knew immediately that we had stumbled upon something dangerous. Just then, the sound of an engine grew louder. Ellie and I didn't hesitate. We ran into the woods just in time to see a black pickup truck drive into the clearing. We watched as two men got out of the truck. They were talking to each other, but we couldn't hear what they were saying. One of them seemed to notice our tracks because he pointed straight in our direction. We ran faster than I ever thought we could. I heard the men chasing after us. Luckily, they were not as quick. Ellie and I were experienced with tough terrain, which gave us an advantage. We finally made it back to the familiar path and hurried to our car. We didn't stop there. We drove straight to the nearest police station and led them back to the cabin. But when we got there, it was empty. The truck was also gone. The police officer told us that the cabin had been unused for a long time, and those men were probably using it as a place to transfer illegal drugs. I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. I'm not sure if they ever caught those men. That day left me with a deep sense of fear, but it hasn't stopped me from hiking new trails. There's always a risk, no matter where you go or what you do. I refuse to let one scary experience keep me from doing what I love. I work as a cashier at a Target store, and I used to cover the night shift. This Target stays open until midnight, and during those late hours, I was often the only cashier around since we barely had any customers that late. Although there was a whole team busy restocking shelves, they were scattered all over the huge store, leaving me isolated at the front. I spent most of those quiet night hours either reading magazines or daydreaming about leaving my job to travel the world, away from the confining walls and the loud crowds that usually filled the store during the earlier part of my shift. My attention was buried in a magazine when I finally noticed someone standing at my register. I couldn't tell how long he had been there before I saw him. He was a young guy, around 19 or 20, wearing torn jeans and a grimy t-shirt. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were red and tired. I looked at him without much interest. By now, I hardly ever bother to greet the customers. I mean, I'm just a cashier. They know what they're here for. He put a can of soda on the counter and stared at the floor. I scanned it and muttered, "That's 89 cents, please." He dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. His hands were shaking as he handed it over. He wouldn't look at me. Something was clearly making him nervous. After I gave him his change, he hurried out of the store, yet through the window I saw him pacing back and forth right in front of the entrance. Something was clearly troubling him, but it wasn't my concern. So I turned back to the dull stories in one of those free newspapers you pick up at the bus stop. A few minutes later, I glanced up to see the young man had returned to the store. He stood about 10 or 15 feet away from my register, staring at me with shaking hands. His face looked like he might start crying any moment. "Can I help you, sir?" I called out to him. He started walking towards me slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. As he came closer, his right hand moved behind his back as if he was reaching for his wallet from his back pocket. Suddenly, he stopped, then spun around and walked back the way he came. As he left the store, I caught a glimpse of a gun tucked into his waistband. That must have been what he was reaching for. Reflecting on what happened and his behavior, I think he planned to rob the store, but decided against it at the last moment. I can't help but imagine the desperation someone must feel to consider robbing a store for just a few $100s. My register never holds more than $300 in cash. Honestly, he might have gotten more by breaking a display case and grabbing a few Xboxes. Not that I'm suggesting he should have done that. It just shows how poorly thought out his plan was. That night was probably the scariest of my life, and I'm relieved he chose not to go through with his plan. One summer weekend a few years ago, my cousins and I decided to go camping for just a night or two. At that time, I was 22 years old, and my cousins, Bella and Lucy, were twin sisters, a couple of years younger than me. We lived in an area with lots of public land, so we didn't need to reserve a campsite. We were all pretty new to camping. None of us had the right gear or knew much about surviving outdoors, but that was part of the adventure. Our plan was to drive to a Target in the next town to pick up everything we needed: tents, food, and a stove. This store would be our last stop before heading into the wild. The road to our destination was lined with tall evergreen trees. The sun shone brightly, which was good because the weather forecast had mentioned rain. "There it is," Bella said with a laugh, pointing as the Target came into view. "Just one more stop," I replied. We parked near the front of the store and went inside, splitting up to shop faster. I was tasked with buying the tents, Bella was on food duty, and Lucy was to find something to play music without using the car battery. I planned to get a small tent for myself and a bigger one for Bella and Lucy since they were very close and even shared a bedroom back home despite being 17. As I walked through the store, I noticed a man who made me uneasy. He was around 50 with long gray hair and a scruffy beard. Our eyes met, and he smiled. I managed a weak smile in return and hurried past him toward the camping gear. I wasn't too concerned at the moment, so I continued and grabbed 2 tents. After I picked up the tents, I found Bella, who had already gathered all our food for the weekend. "You ready to go?" she asked me. "I'm ready. Let's look for Lucy so we can leave," I replied. I was eager for the trip to begin, so finding Lucy quickly was the next step. Bella, unlike her sister Lucy, was sharp and bold, while Lucy tended to agree with people too much, sometimes even appearing innocent to the point of naivety. We searched the store, looking for Lucy to wrap up our shopping. Eventually, we found her in the electronics section, but she wasn't alone. She was chatting with the same older man I had seen earlier. We stood about 15 feet away, close enough to overhear their conversation. The man was asking Lucy many questions about our trip, our destination, what we planned to do, who would be with us, and disturbingly, if any of us were carrying a gun. To my dismay, Lucy was answering all his questions. Why would he need to know if we had a gun? Bella noticed my alarm and swiftly intervened. "Hey, Lucy, we've got all we need. We should head out," Bella said firmly, cutting between her sister and the man. Lucy seemed to realize her mistake as she saw the worry on Bella's face. We paid for our items and headed to the car, quickly discussing what had just happened. Lucy and I felt it was unlikely that the man had harmful intentions, but Bella was genuinely concerned. Despite Bella's worries, the 2 of us convinced her to proceed with our plans. An hour into our drive, we began to relax and get excited about camping. Suddenly, Bella tensed up. "Do you see that?" she exclaimed. "See what?" I asked. "Is that the guy from Target?" she asked, her voice filled with panic. I glanced back and saw a car trailing us. Behind the wheel was the same man from the store. Right then, we decided to cancel our camping trip. Instead, we checked into a budget hotel nearby and ended up having a surprisingly fun weekend there. It seemed like a wise choice given that the man appeared to be following us. We opted not to contact the police as there wasn't much to report. After all, he hadn't done anything overtly illegal. Still, the encounter left us shaken, and I couldn't help but feel grateful that Bella had been so observant. It seemed we had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous situation.